Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the 147 kingdoms that have recently gone into Season of Strife. This is 11 through 21, 65 and 86 who skipped the first season of Strife and are now going to be participating in this kingdom pool, 91 through 118, 155 through 212, 241 through 264, and lastly, 289 through 312. Now, these kingdoms out of this 147 server group have already started their Season of Strife. I believe they're 5 to 6 chapters in, but Zone 2 has yet to open. It is SoS 1-19 through SoS 1-31. The first 18 groups were the ones who went in first. Those were those 119 kingdoms that went in previously. Those are the ones that were made up from 1 through 10, 22 through 90, 213 through 240, and 277 through 288. Okay, that's a mouthful. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up, because it helps out a lot. So today, we're going to be looking over some new data, migration winners and losers, who got the most, who's ranking up high. I'll even show you some kingdom data that I pulled for the top kingdoms going in, except it's not going to be sorted top to bottom, but there is some interesting migration information that I want to show you, along with basically reconfirming what the kingdom power / server power cap is. Okie dokie. Artichokes. Let's go ahead and dive in. There's also going to be some comparison between the first group and this group as well as it pertains to migration and a couple other areas. All right, let's go ahead and shabooya bang right over here to the goods. So we have two docs we're going to be referring to. This is the, again, first SOS group that went in, the 119 kingdoms. And this one, which is the most recent SOS kingdom pool, this is 147 kingdoms. As you can see here, we initially showed off some data before when we covered this a little while back, where you can see here that there was 74 kings and queens that were made up from these 147 kingdoms. That number is still consistent. Previously, out of the 119 kingdoms in the first SOS group pool, there was 74 kings as well. However, there was 119 kingdoms that went in there compared to the 147 now. So you can see the difference where there was a little over 62% of the kingdoms had a king or queen, whereas almost about half, right, a little more than half, have a king or queen. So that number has dipped, basically meaning that the kingdoms are either inactive or they're low activity or they're just not strong enough to capture, right, dragon at that point. Okay, let's go ahead and get into some of the migration goods. So first off, we're going to show you migration slots, unranked, just to kind of show you how we did it this time. And comparing that with what we ended up doing here, right? So similar migration slots, but you can see we just kind of put in a nice little alliance tab there. But these are the kingdoms all listed off. These are their spaces remaining. If it has a question mark here, that's because the kingdom is full. And I wasn't able to figure out what the number was before it hit full. Small improvement note for the developers, if anyone is watching this or from the CC team, even if the kingdom goes full, instead of having it 0-0, just keep the number. So if it's, 113 over 300, and then just cut it off, right? Just turn the immigration text color red or whatever you have to do, or a little asterisk next to it, or a little quotation box that says kingdom is full, right? Whatever it is. Because it still would be nice to see how many players went in before the kingdom turned full. Right? And so the fact that it just goes from whatever that number is to 0, and if you're not watching it like a hawk in real time, you just kind of miss out on it. So that's unfortunate. Hopefully a little opportunity there. So we'll kind of scroll through some. You can see, again, some alliances. Now, if an alliance was, in this case, not included, that's just because that kingdom does not have a king or queen, right? So we only included it if there was one. And then we have some cool data. Well, we'll show you that in a moment here. So now, let's go and show off the rankings. So before we show, actually, I guess we'll start kind of like here. I don't want to show everything. Again, we're going to come back to everything too. So again, if it's 0, that just means that nobody migrated into that kingdom. And you can see there is a decent number of them. Finally, starting here with Kingdom 243, that ended up getting 5 people coming in, again, whether that was to IFAP or others. So we'll kind of show you the first batch here. Now, a note, I actually color-coded the kingdoms based on their finished migration activity status. So I thought that was something new that I did this time around compared to last time. I thought it would be nice for everyone to kind of see a visual on, oh, well, now this is easier to point out, right? I can tell 260 is crowded, 300 is active, right? So just a nice little visual aid, if you will. Okay, so we'll go to 52 to 27, and you can see here, it's interesting, you have some active kingdoms that are still higher than some of the crowded kingdoms because they got a decent bit of people coming in. I mean, look, 91 people coming into 188, 78, I also cut it off at 50, right? So if there was more than 50 people that migrated in, right, that's where I added one of these just for time's sake purposes, because it takes a minute if you feel me. And now we'll get to like the top 26 that you can see here. A couple interesting notes. 198 is still active, but they got, oopsies. Jeez. Hang on. One moment. Oh, darn. 101. Hang on. Let's correct this one moment because it's bugging me. I thought we were good. Everyone's going to be like, boss. Rookie mistake. I know. You don't have to tell me. Okay. I get it. It's fixed. All right. With that in mind, now we're Gucci. So in that case, we will go to 309, where 309 ended up getting 146 people in, but they're still active. And 289 got 111, 198 got 101. I think, yeah, so you have 3 kingdoms that ended up having 100 plus players migrate in, with one of those being almost 150, but they're still active. Right, so I just want to kind of point that out because that's pretty cool to see that you have some kingdoms that are still, that got a bunch of people in. And this kind of goes towards this idea of that normal and active status kingdoms still have value. It just really depends on who's going to go there and how lean the kingdom is. So like, let's say, and I'll give you a little pro tip here. Let's say you're a kingdom that you're normal or your active status, and you're trying to figure out ways to maybe revive or revitalize the kingdom. One of the things you can do in the meantime is kind of working on leaning the kingdom out, whether that's zeroing inactive people, like people that you've reached out to, you've attempted to contact, no one's responding, they don't play, you don't notice any power growth, but you feel like, you know what, maybe they could be affecting the kingdom influence based on their individual player influence, right? That's just one example of something you can do to lean the kingdom out to make it maybe a little bit more attractive if you're trying to get 1, 2, 3 alliances or however many people to potentially move there. If you also have access to multiple existing shells, this is something that is also a great benefit. I may do another video on this where I really kind of do a deep dive on how you can kind of prep inactive or dead kingdoms to really be kind of prime real estate for people to move there. There is a market for it, but you really have to be able to kind of check off a number of boxes in order to be really appealing. So then we get to a little bit at the top of the boards. You can see here that there was 28 kingdoms that had 100 or more migrants going in. We had 19 kingdoms at 120 migrants or more going in, 13 kingdoms at 150 plus migrants going in, 7 kingdoms at 200 plus. And I want to point out, the previous record that was set for the most amount of migrants that came into a kingdom, at least as it pertains to the SOS groups, was 186. And that was a tie break between TFS and YBD going into 23 and 232, right? So you have 9 kingdoms that have broken the migration record by being able to get the most amount in. Now, obviously, maybe these went 300 over 300, but it's more than likely they probably didn't before they ended up zeroing out from full status. So what that means is that Lion is basically the new record holder, right, for 278 people going into Kingdom 310. So that's pretty awesome to see. So a lot of goods here. Now, let's take a look at some data, some nice compilation or summarized data, because you guys know me, I very much like looking at these things. So in the previous SOS group for the 119 kingdoms, there was 76 kingdoms that saw migration, people coming in. Right? So that's 51. Oh, sorry. That's the first one here, right? So sorry, 60 kingdoms that saw migration with people coming in, right? So that was 50.42% of the 119 kingdoms that went in that saw some migration movement coming in. That there was a total of 2,468 players that migrated during that window. Again, albeit any that zeroed out and we couldn't get the data before then. This came out to about 6.91% of total player, and this is available slots. So if you're assuming that each kingdom has 300 slots that could go in, how many of those slots were utilized? 2,468 were, or that equates to 6.91% movement that we saw. This KvK for these 147 kingdoms saw a lot more. Even though you only increase the kingdoms from 119 to 147, which is, what, 28, if that's right, give or take? And, right, so you had 28 out of 119. I mean, that's like, what, 20, 25%, right, give or take here. And so from there, you saw 6,536 players move. So a lot more players moved, right? You can see here, more than double the percentage, 14.82% of players moved, and those kingdoms saw movement going in out of the total available slots. So a lot more migration now, which you can argue really makes sense because, one, in the first migration window, there wasn't enough time for a number of people to kind of get the necessary permits that they needed. So that's, I'm sure, a factor. Along with, there's been a little bit more time, so you've had that kind of monthly reset on the permit bundle as well. And so now it kind of gets to this point of where you've had a little bit more time that has elapsed. More people have been able to grab or to collect permits needed to move, right? So I think that's very much a factor, and probably a decent sized one, that goes into why we're seeing an increase. But this is nice to see. I think it's great to see movement, especially when the movement is a little bit higher rather than it being lower. Now, you can make arguments that if there's not really a lot of movement happening, it could be because kingdoms are full or crowded. Maybe they don't need a lot of people because they're already, I guess, heavy in a sense, right? And maybe they're trying to lean out. But there's also, I like to see that there's a lot of movement because it shows a lot of fluidity and flexibility in kingdoms where if people need to get out of situations for whatever reason that may be and they want to go somewhere, there's that opportunity to do so. On one note, I do want to say I would love to see the cooldown period reduced from 90 days to maybe like 55 to 60 days. So that way, if people want to migrate out after playing a season in that new home, they can, because sometimes some kingdoms may not just end up working out or be exactly what you thought they were going to be, or things can change, right? Especially if you're moving somewhere and maybe you had promises or certain expectations that you were hoping were going to be played out and they didn't. It's nice to not be stuck there basically for 2 seasons. So that's my one thing I would love to see them make an adjustment on. With that in mind, I also gave some totals. The totals here I thought would be interesting. So when we look across these 266 kingdoms, if you're adding up the 147 to the 119, right, you had 136 kingdoms that saw movement, right, that saw people migrating in. That was a little more than 51%. Now, you can also talk about the other side of this, which is that the 48.87%, right, or almost half, did not see any movement, and therefore are probably on that normal or active status. With that in mind, does that mean that those kingdoms are, slowly dying? They're slowly losing more activity? Are they inactive? Are they actually truly dead at this point? Right? That is something interesting as well, because how do we think about that where it's kind of like this 2-to-1 ratio of or I guess 1-to-1, right, where it's kind of like even at that point, right? So it's like the same, basically almost the same amount of kingdoms that are active and are seeing migration. The other half of them are not seeing any migration and are inactive or going inactive, right? Or you could just say on kind of a downward trend, regardless of how steep the decline is. With that in mind, between the first SOS and this SOS, we saw 9,004 players move out of the potential 79,800 from those 266 kingdoms, right? So we saw 11.28% movement happening, right? Which again, I would say is decent. The cool thing is that this is actually kind of like an activity number. Like, it's very soft, right? Of an activity number that does not apply for kingdoms, players existing or currently in those kingdoms that did not move. This is just kind of external movement. But it is nice to see some activity numbers when you're looking at like how many people are moving, because it also will indicate to you how many people are either buying permit bundles or the amount of people that, and this is probably more likely the amount of people that are purchasing bundles, I would say is probably more, I would say is the majority of these people compared to the free-to-play. Or you could maybe say it's like a little more than half. I would just anticipate that based on the fact that a lot of these kingdoms are older, and because a lot of the players on average are a little bit higher powered, there's more likely of a chance that they're going to have to purchase in order to move, especially in the first SOS compared to the second one. But it would be interesting to see what that breakdown is, right? Like how many people moved that were free to play, how many people moved that were spenders. Like that would be really cool to see. The last thing I'm going to show you is some top kingdoms. or at least, again, it's not ordered at all, but I will point out a couple here, right, that really validate and reconfirm that 23 bill cap that we've been talking about, even though we've been averaging it to 22 to 23 bill when it comes to Season of Strife and SB2, right, as we got there, because we did a video breakdown of this before. And you can see here that full status 22.56 or 52, right, this is for alliances at 1 billion power or more. And again, that's because individual player influence, even if you're active, can factor into total kingdom influence. So we don't want to leave anyone out because there's always the chance that they could count towards it. Then we also have Kingdom 96 outside of 15. They're at 22.8, so you're seeing the consistency here, right? Basically 300 mil off. And then the next one we have is, oh gosh, 10 bucks says I already passed it, right? Probably, yeah. 110. And so they're right at 23 bill. And so again, this very much goes into that where the kingdom status is very much, I believe, determined based on power for the most part, even though, yes, there are other individual player influences that total up to your kingdom influence. I think at least when if you're just trying to like go bare minimum, just looking at some of the raw, like a raw single data stat that can really at least illuminate that for you, this has been consistent so far based on the full status kingdoms and some of the crowded status kingdoms that I've looked at across multiple seasons when we did that big deep dive a number of videos ago. And so this is consistent, right? You can say that the cap right now, at least for where it's maxed out at, is at 23 billion power. And as you get closer to there, right, once you kind of get over that 22 billion threshold, you're kind of getting into that bubble position where at any point you could probably end up hitting full, right? You could maybe say it's 22 and a half, but 23 bill, I think, is pretty consistent. But that's why we kind of give that range of 22 to 23, but that's what we've been seeing so far. So with that in mind, that's pretty much it. I'll kind of show everyone the stuff if you guys want to look at it. I will eventually be releasing this sheet too as well. I know I usually always get that question every season for people that want to look at all the data. The only thing is that I want to finish completing the sheet first. So once I finish completing the sheet, then I will make it accessible. It'll be on my Discord where you can go on the Call of Dragons plus jumping section, and I'm going to put it on the COD Data Stats channel for those of you that are familiar with that. And again, I'll show that to you as well on where that is going to be. I just want to make sure that I don't have anything, sensitive up, if you will. And I don't. Lovely. So let's do this. I'm just going to full screen. Let's go back. So when you join the Discord, link to that in the pinned comment description, you'll go to Call of Dragons plus jumping, third reaction from the left. You'll go to Call of Dragons plus jumping, and then you'll go to COD Data Stats. And I'm probably going to throw it somewhere here, like where I have this SB2 group preview data. This was the first one. So I'll probably just edit that out and put this new one here once I finish. But again, the plan right now is to finish this, so I have to do the alliances, the personal power. That's what I'm going to be working on today. And then we will also be doing matchups, right? So, or sorry, not matchups, but like who's in what groups. So, for example, I'll be filling this out for each of the new SoS 1 groups that we showed you on that preview screen on the kingdom list in-game. And then I'll be putting all the kingdoms that are there. I'll be filling this in, and then we'll do another video that covers that. And then eventually maybe we'll do a video after that that covers what the matchups are after I go and reach out to everyone to find out what those exactly are for those kingdoms or KvK groups that have already figured out what their matchups and who's going to be working with who. That's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this one as always. If you can think of anything else you'd like to see me cover, let me know in the comments down below. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.